Ira Rothken and I will be sharing legal answers, tips, solutions, commentary, inviting everyone else in the room to do the same. Share your thoughts on everything Web3. What's the truth about decentralization? What's the truth about NFT, blockchain security, and royalties? And Ira's involved in a lot of exciting things. So really, everything's on the table. This is an opportunity to tap into a lot of good experience. Everyone, Ira is the OG when it comes to lawyers who happen to be computer programmers, coders. He's involved with all the big companies you see each and every day on all the platforms. My go-to when it comes to anything technical. And Ira, it's really a pleasure to see you here. Sorry about last week. Some things happened that were beyond my control, but it's good to be back here in Twitter Spaces. Let's get things going, Ira, by having my son, Garrett Jackson, unmute. And I'd like Garrett to meet Ira Rothken. Ira Rothken, I'd like you to meet my son, Garrett Jackson.
Hi, Mr. Rothken. It's nice to meet you.
No. You call me Ira. It's perfectly fine, and it's great meeting you too. And your father and I are kind of like old nerds. We're probably still pretty good at sports, though. I get the sense your father's still great at tennis and stuff.
Oh
But
yeah,
we're
he's
still
got some
nerds.
speed.
Yeah. I would imagine that. But nice to meet you, Garrett. Why don't you say a few words about yourself? I understand you're at USC, which is a great school. So are you a senior?
Yeah, so I'm in my second semester of my senior year. I have one class left, so I have plenty of free time to be working on Maneuver. I'm super excited about this. It's been really fun working with my dad. I'm meeting so many incredible business people, and it's just been a really just great process of getting into the workforce, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Well, I'm glad that you're going into that as a career, and I got to learn more about this, Mitch, because you're bringing them up here right now, and I got to figure out what he's talking about because it sounds like you're starting a company, Garrett. What is your company going to do other than the clue that I see that has VR in its name?
So what we're looking at Maneuver is we're trying to help companies integrate their current practices, whatever they're doing, into the Web3 universe, the metaverse. And whether that's the creation of NFTs or the creation of a digital workspace, we want to help them find out how to implement it into their practice because the reality is in the next few years, everybody's going to be trying to get involved. And it's kind of at that point where Web 2, everyone realized they needed a website. I think the same thing is going to happen with Web 3, and we're just figuring out what all these different companies need. So our goal is to help steer those companies in the right direction.
Well, you come from a good line of folks who are early adopters. Your father's been doing social media for lawyers since the start of social media, which is probably older than most folks in the room, right, Mitch?
I think you're right, Ira. And I hope that when it's all said and done with Maneuver that Garrett and I started together earlier this year, we're so excited about it, Ira. We've got the company incorporated. We've got some IP stuff already handled. I'm hoping we can refer a lot of legal business your way. And that goes for everyone in the room. If we have experts in the room, whether or not it has to do with Web3 design, whether it has to do with blockchain coding, smart contract creation, we're looking to build relationships with third party consultants who we know, like, and trust. Ira happens to be all of the above. And so that when we have Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies that come to us that want to start slowly building out a presence into the metaverse, we know who to bring into the conversation to make sure it's done right. So, Ira, the biggest challenge with Garrett is last week in spring break, he was over on the Big Island all week long. And tomorrow morning, he's heading over to Vegas with his fraternity brothers for a weekend getaway. So I'm going to have a hard time keeping this kid lassoed behind the keyboard. Any thoughts as a fellow dad?
Well, I've got a junior who I'm sure has similar habits. He's down at the Claremont colleges, not too far away from USC, and exhibiting very similar behavior. Driving the 3.5 hours to Vegas is certainly something that I've seen, and he's 21 right now, which makes it more interesting for him. So all I can say is I can empathize, Mitch Jackson.
Okay, and maybe what we'll do is the four of us will get together for father-son dinners here in Orange County or LA sometime, and we can talk strategy and take things to the next level. But Ira, I did want you to meet Garrett. Garrett, I'm glad you took time to jump on stage with us and say hello to Ira Rothken. And this is going to be a fun conversation tonight. We're talking Web3. We're talking Web3 solutions, issues, challenges, and questions. And I think between the three of us on stage, and also other friends who will be joining us shortly in the audience who are already here, I think the brain trust, Ira, is sufficient enough to probably get most people through this evening's conversation in time, by the way, everyone, to watch the Arizona Houston tip off later on this evening in the NC2A tournament. So this should be fun. Ira, before people were joining us, I was talking to you about a new potential client this morning that reached out to us. $500,000 went sideways, $250,000 transactions. Out the window, it's gone. It was a cryptocurrency, metal wallet type of scenario. Our mutual friend, Brian Fanzo, had 4, 5, 6, 7 NFTs go sideways from his wallet. I think he posted publicly in his podcast something around $28,000, $30,000 in losses. What are your thoughts just getting things started with, as we're all learning more about NFTs, as we're learning more about how complicated some of the transactions, maybe unnecessarily so, end up being? What can we do to stay safe and avoid being the victim of fraud or criminal conduct? What are some safety tips?
Well, look, I think that many of us in the space, particularly tech-centric folks, many of us oscillate like an EKG between the level of decentralization where we think the porridge is just right. On some days, I feel like a decentralization maxi. On other days, when I hear about things like this, I think to myself, wow, would this be better if the decentralization on the blockchain is used in a narrow way for cryptocurrency and NFT trading, but we really do wrap a lot of centralization around it so that we could have a check and balance on hacking and mistakes with wallets. For me, when I look at my own behavior, and I'm probably sophisticated, okay? How many times I do spelling errors on my iPhone is staggering. Like I'll look back at it and I'll go, what? I wrote the word then instead of there or whatever the heck it is. And I'm thinking, okay, now I use MetaMask on my iPhone. You can't unring the bell with MetaMask on your iPhone. And look, MetaMask is one of the companies for Consensus who I work with. I love MetaMask. We want to support them. But the reality of it is that the current state of the blockchain ecosystem is littered with unforced errors and risk. And we have to fix that. And where we come out in the balance between decentralization and ways for folks to unring the bell, which requires a little more centralization, I think that's a great debate for us to have.
You mentioned in an earlier space about two-factor authentication, why it's not actually as safe as we think it might be. And we also have talked about hard wallets in the past. What are your thoughts on hard wallets? Is that something we should all be using, or is it hype and it doesn't really work since we have to at some point attach it to our accounts either through Bluetooth or plugging it into our computer?
Well, yeah, I mean, the cold storage wallets do work. I got them a long time ago. I'm thinking back in the ICO era is when I started getting those kinds of cold storage wallets. They look like a USB key. There's like a few of them that are really well known. Well, yeah, you have to be very careful in how you use those. Generally speaking, you don't buy it on Amazon. You buy it directly from the known manufacturer and have it shipped directly to you, so folks can't plant Trojans on it. But I do think those are a good idea. But let's just be honest about it. They're really annoying. Like for me, it's just like I want to look at my NFTs like it's a video game nicely on my phone. I want to move them around. And, I constantly have to remind myself that wallet addresses are not file directories. Like I want to be able to sort my NFTs by different wallet address and I have to remember that there's gas fees involved in moving stuff around. So right now, the current state of things is high risk. These kinds of cold storage wallets, keys, they're great. So two-factor authentication can be good, so long as you don't get a SIM card hijack and you're using your mobile number as your second factor of authentication. You should use something like Google or Microsoft Authenticator as your two-factor authentication, which is better. We are working on two-factor authentication on the blockchain itself. I think there's going to be some solution soon, but it's a very complicated road. So that's my answer.
I'm experiencing the same everyday use challenges. It's not convenient. I'm using a Ledger Nano X, and it's great, but it's not as convenient as just using my MetaMask wallet. And there's a balance. So if I'm doing a transaction that might involve some zeros behind it, I want to take extra precautions. But I'm also afraid of infecting my wallet, my digital wallet, so that someone's camping out waiting for the right time to pounce. It's an interesting time. What's interesting is I love getting questions from people in the audience, and we have VGF, which I think is short for Video Game Freak, up on stage. Thank you for joining us. Unmute and jump in with your questions, your comments, your thoughts on anything Web3.
Hey, Mitch, appreciate you. Ira, good to see you as always. Garrett, nice to meet you. Reinforcing something that Ira had said, yes, please get a hardware wallet. It's not about the little plastic USB key. It's about the hardware generation and storage of that seed phrase, the offline generation of that seed. I like, for sake of argument, my software wallet is probably safer than a lot of people's hardware wallet because of how it's used. So I highly encourage people to partition their wallets. I'm a huge fan of, I use my hot wallet for a lot of things, but I also have a hardware wallet that I use basically as a safety deposit box. Very little ever goes there, and it definitely doesn't sign any contracts other than a to and from send and receive kind of transaction there. But yeah, I was curious your guys' opinions. I'm sure you may have seen earlier the Department of Justice pursuing two defendants around NFT fraud, kind of wire transfer and money laundering. Definitely an interesting precedent that could be set there.
What do you think, Ira? Are you following that case?
I am doing research in real time, and I could see in one of my law updates that two defendants were charged in an NFT fraud and money laundering things. Came out of the Southern District of New York.
It was out of New York, so not really surprising.
Yeah, and it's on the federal level. Defendants executed a $1 million NFT fraud scheme in January of this past year, and were preparing to execute a second one prior to their arrests. And wire fraud makes a lot of sense. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, he's the one who runs that office. You know what? I'm going to read it right out loud so we can have a conversation about it. Here's the quote. NFTs have been around for several years, but recently mainstream interest has skyrocketed. Where there's money to be made, fraudsters will look for ways to steal it. As we allege, Mr. and Mr., I'm not going to mention their names, you could read it, promise investors the benefits of the Frosties NFTs. But when it sold out, they pulled the rug out from under the victims, almost immediately shutting down the website and transferring the money. Our job as prosecutors and law enforcement is to protect investors from swindlers looking for a payday. All right, so now what's the question, VGF, that raises?
Well, so one of my kind of maybe red flags of attention was actually in a quote a little further down. Mm-hmm. So the IRS special agent in charge, the language of his quote was very interesting to me because he said NFTs represent a new era for financial investments, and the same rules apply to an investment in an NFT or a real estate development. Can't solicit funds for a business opportunity, abandon that business, abscond with money investors provided you. seems to be implying that NFTs are indeed equity investments and not assets or revenue generation, which I think is an important distinction to make. Because I think many of us would argue that these are assets and revenue generating devices for companies rather than financial equity investment.
You know what's really, this is a really, thank you for bringing this up. This is a great way actually to start off our Twitter Spaces. So here's essentially the allegations. But what's so nice about this is that so many lessons could be learned. Okay, they talk about rug pull. Now, one would argue that if you're just selling art with no roadmap and someone gets the art, you almost can't be rug pulled. You got the art, it can't be taken away. The IPFS server has it. You have a little link in your NFT to that server. You have access to your art. There can't be a rug pull. So by creating a roadmap, you're now putting yourself in the position where if you don't follow through or had no intention of following through, someone could say you're committing fraud. So here are the allegations. And it starts with the DOJ alleging that a rug pull refers to a scenario where the creator of an NFT and or gaming project solicits investments. Okay, now it's the term investment because it's got a roadmap, right? And then abruptly abandons a project and fraudulently retains the project investor's funds. So in some ways, and this is not legal advice, but in some ways, we're seeing some of the first signs from the government that having a roadmap is equivalent to moving an NFT from a collectible art to crowdfunding investment. And it says, according to the official Frosty's website, the website is essentially roadmap or advertising what you're going to do in the future. Frosty's purchases would be eligible for holder rewards, such as giveaways, early access to a metaverse game, and exclusive mint passes to upcoming Frosty seasons. Now, one would argue that if these defendants would have shut the you-know-what up and simply just sold the artwork, they may not find themselves in the bind they're in. But by actually, advertising what's coming down the road and not doing it, they created this investment vehicle for which
It's pretty explicitly fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now it says, in reality, they disguised their real names so they didn't dox themselves. They abruptly abandoned the Frosty's project, and within hours after selling the Frosty's NFTs, deactivated the website and transferred approximately 1.1 million in crypto to various wallets under their control in multiple transactions. And now they show this screenshot. All right. So this is VGF, this is a great lesson for us to have this room. And I'm glad you brought it to our attention. And that is, hey, look, and first let's look at it from the point of view of someone running a project. Don't have a roadmap, okay? Do not have a roadmap, because a roadmap, if done in almost any manner where there's a foot fault, could lead to an unlicensed security. Forget even if you're being honest. Now, if you're going to have a roadmap, you got to be honest. Maybe they won't be as harsh on you. Maybe they won't even prosecute you. Maybe you'll get like a letter saying, fix this. But here, these folks were apparent alleged fraudsters. But don't have a roadmap. Sell the art. And then maybe consider in the future, without any promises, doing other things for your holders. Under promise, over deliver. So now, what do you do? What do you do if you're a buyer of basically these types of profile picture NFT projects? It is an absolute crapshoot. It is. I keep saying that, everyone wishes they bought Bored Apes. And those folks did a great job. But the reality of it is you have no idea. I go into these rooms, we all do, and people say, well, you got to do your research, you got to doc somebody, you got to really understand who has integrity. All right, I'm a member of the Keiretsu Forum. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've been an angel investor for almost that long. About 80% of our angel investments, we have full due diligence. We have a lot of folks, many of them young folks from Ivy League schools or schools like Ivy League schools like USC, Garrett. And we do a lot of vetting. 80% of them fail. We think we're good judges of character. So in a perfect world where you have great due diligence, 80% of folks, many of which are well-intentioned, will fail. If those things were roadmaps for NFTs, a lot of folks would just say you got rugged. So you have to go into this saying, all right, wait a second. If 80% of startups that get angel investment money with sophisticated investors who have disclosure rights and preference and due diligence, if they fail, I would say the odds of succeeding once we have an efficient marketplace on NFTs, if folks are relying upon ambitious results beyond artwork, are going to fail. Mitch, what are your thoughts on that?
You're spot on. I mean, look, any type of financial fraud, whether or not it's deemed to be part of a security, can be part of an NFT transaction. And my take on this is, without having read the case, but seeing the headlines, is if there is criminal fraud, if there is wrongdoing, if there are misrepresentations, regardless of whether or not something is a quote unquote security, then those wrongdoers need to be accountable. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see more state and federal prosecutions across the board in the Web3 community, specifically oriented towards these types of transactions as the year progresses and all the way through 2023 and beyond. You know, when you look at what a security is, everyone in the audience, and while I'm sharing this Howie test with everyone, do me a favor and do Ira and Garrett and I a favor, hit the plus sign, share this out to your community. Let's get some more butts in the digital seats. I've shared this on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I encourage everyone to do the same. You will not leave the room. You can just press the button and share this out. But a security is a tradable financial asset. That's what a security is. And the term commonly refers to any form of financial instrument, but its legal definition varies by jurisdiction. And so the Howie case, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case all the way back in 1946, delineated 4 factors for determining whether an investment is a security. And obviously, if you have a good lawyer like Ira and any one of these 4 factors are at issue, I think the lawyer with the best expert, the lawyer with the best advocacy skills might be the lawyer prevailing on any of these 4 issues. But generally speaking, you want to ask yourself these 4 questions to determine whether or not, especially in the NFT world, you know, this NFT project is a security. And if it is, that doesn't make it illegal or invalid. It just means that you have to comply with certain SEC rules, regulations, and registration requirements if you're the individuals or companies behind the offering. Okay, so number 1, is there an investment in money? Is the NFT drop that's at issue here or anyplace else, is there an investment in money that's being sought after? Number 2, in a common enterprise. Well, the NFT drops are usually a common enterprise. It's one theme, one project, 10,000 items. Number 3, is there an expectation of profit? Well, we're not getting into this to lose money. Some of us may be getting into it for social good, but the majority of NFT drops, there's some element of expectation of profit. Number 4, is the profit expected to be derived from the efforts of a promoter or third party? And that's something that each and every NFT drop, it's a little bit different, right? How they're set up, the roadmaps, and everything else in between. So you want to look at those 4 elements. You know, Wikipedia, SEC versus Howie Company, if you want to learn more about this. My only following thought would be, Ira, when it comes to fractional NFTs, tokens that represent an interest or financial fractional ownership of an NFT. I think what I'm reading, some of the research I've seen, those are a little bit more maybe apt to fall within those 4 guidelines, those 4 steps under the Howie test, as opposed to an artist creating a single NFT and then putting it out, you know, on OpenSea and inviting people to make bids for that sale. That's probably not going to fall under being deemed a security. However, once you get into the fractional NFT world, I think things start to get a little dicey. And so whether or not it's a security, whether or not it's financial fraud, all of these things, I think, are going to be prosecuted more in the future than what a lot of people might expect. So I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's an interesting case. And after the game tonight, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to read the whole case and see what's going on.
Yeah, I tried to link it at the top, but for some reason I can't find the link interface on Twitter Spaces right now.
I can't either. I can't either.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. All right, so so then the question would be, all right, what do you do if you're an artist? Obviously, I said, well, don't do a roadmap. But let's say, you know what? I don't like this, by the way, but I'm going to say it anyway. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it. That's what I hear all the
Wait,
time.
is that an affirmative defense, Ira?
It's the everyone is doing it one. It's everyone's doing it. You're creating friction, and Bored Apes wouldn't be there if you told them not to do it. And so here's what I have to say to that. In fact, large parts of the crypto space wouldn't be there if everybody listened to the most conservative lawyers, to be frank. So here's what I have to say. This is not legal advice, but this is pragmatic feedback. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. I mean, the executive order from the White House pretty much admits there's uncertainty. Some certain senators have even said there is, and they want to get guidance. They want to get more clarity through statutes. So what do you do during this environment when we have uncertainty? We have Dapper being sued in New York for unlicensed securities for perhaps one of the most conservative NFT projects, which is NBA Top Shot. You've got this DOJ prosecution, which, let's face it, it's freaking obvious. It doesn't have to be the blockchain. This could have been an eBay thing. I mean, they'd be prosecuted. You know, you don't tell somebody you're going to go ahead and do all these things for them, get the money, and then take the website down. You know, actually, they really sucked at actually being bad. If they just would have left the website up, I'd almost understand it, but they took the website down. Anyway, so what do you do? Be honest. That's my answer. Now you'd say, well, that's really great, Ira. You know, we're here in this room and you guys charge $1,200 an hour. But if you're going to go ahead and you're going to do a PFP project and you're aiming to be the fish or the car in the middle of the road that's going 70 miles an hour and it's slightly over the speed limit, don't be the car going 100. You're going to get pulled over if you go 100. If you're going 70, you're in the mainstream. This is not exactly legal advice. It shouldn't be, but it is statistics advice. If you're honest in your roadmap, don't call it that, but if you're honest in what you say you're going to do, and you do it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a prosecutor is likely not going to prosecute you for a foot fault, for a technicality of being honorable and following through on what you promised. Oh, and by the way, you didn't have like some sort of like hyper-technical securities license, even though you were honest. They're going to go after folks like this case where they stole the money and they took the website down. It is the easiest case like to prosecute. They took the website down. There's no promise as a matter of certainty that you could fulfill. You left no way for folks to contact you. You got everyone to entrust in you. You tore the money out. You kept it for yourself. Where's the value in that? That's an easy case. Just be honest and make it so that if someone comes after you, you get a lawyer who writes back saying, sorry for the foot fault, but we don't have any victims. People tend to be happy. They got what they paid for. That's the scenario you'd want to have for yourself. I know that's kind of like really basic, but people forget that there's ways to mitigate risk, even if it's not perfect, that you can actually control.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to do your due diligence. You know, you want to use third-party services to research who you're investing with and what's the track record of that individual, that company. There are resources that Ira and I have access to where we can check to see if somebody's been found, guilty in civil defense fraud cases. We can determine the financial stability of certain companies and individuals. You can really do your background check on people, Ira, that I think a lot of people don't really even know about, or, they don't figure it out until something bad happens. Also, along those lines, what we're seeing, and Ira, what are your thoughts on this? And I want to continue down. We have a few questions and a few people that have come up. Thank you for jumping up, everybody. let me see. I'm looking at a note. I think Garrett, real quick. I think Garrett may have to bounce. Garrett, why don't you unmute and if you have to leave.
Yep, sorry. Got a physical therapy appointment. I was not the smartest last week and went cliff jumping, landed wrong. It's been a whole thing. But it was so nice to meet you, Ira. I'm really excited about listening to the rest of this back. It's been a great convo so far, and I'm really looking forward to that father-son dinner.
Well, you know what? I hope that you have some video of what happened because it sounds dramatic. But I wish you the very best in your recovery. But your story is excellent.
Thank you, thank you. All right, guys, have a great conversation.
All right.
Take
Have fun
care.
in Vegas, Garrett. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, famous last words. No cliff diving in Hawaii, and of course, how can you not do backflips off a 40 or 50-foot high cliff and not experience the residual downside? The same thing happens in the NFT space. If you're not careful with what you're doing, that metaphor is you're going to end up with a sore neck, a sore back, or you're going to put yourself in the financial hospital. And we don't want to see that happen to anybody. Hey, let's just keep moving along real quick with VGF. Great, stick around, follow up with questions. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Let's discuss another species of rug pull because we have the most dramatic one that we talked about.
Please.
And if you want, folks, you could just go ahead if you're just coming in the room new, just Google DOJ fraud NFT and you'll see a prosecution that was announced today for an NFT project. But there's another species of rug pull. There's a whole bunch of them. You could probably, at some point, we could probably put them on a grid. But there's another one, and that is what happens if someone does an NFT project, it's doing okay, and they want to stop. They want to retire. They want to go work for Google because they got a better offer. What is the graceful decline that would actually be acceptable in this space? We don't really have precedent for it. There's all sorts of genius ideas I heard floated, like I'll create a DAO or give it to society as a whole. But what if when you created your roadmap, you were well-intentioned, but something happened? Someone died, a key member died, someone fell on bad times and they have to go work. Or how about this one? And I've seen this happen firsthand. You go over to a lawyer, they analyze it, they say, you can't really unring the bell, you're already violating the law. And now they don't want to violate the law anymore. They don't want to do a rug pull, but for them to actually be more compliance oriented, it would have an effect of a rug pull. VGF, you have your hand up. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, so I think that as you highlighted, that there's not really a precedent set for this yet, just because of how nascent and new a majority of the NFT space is. But I think that we will see quite a bit of this in the coming months and years, as the reality is that many of these NFT projects are businesses, or at least should be viewed as such.
Yes, for sure.
And a majority of businesses fail. And so I think both collectors and founders alike may be in for a rude awakening when you may have had an otherwise phenomenal artist, maybe an operator, a Solidity developer that had great aspirations, but don't fundamentally understand how to run a business. And the fact that they went and raised hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars off of, an initial token sale, there could be some disgruntled people that had, bought those tokens. I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I think that founders that, go the route of a quote unquote like soft rug, there could end up being kind of a template to follow of maybe it's CCOing the licensing rights or, turning it over to the community, enabling them to hopefully continue development of the project or contributing funds to a community initiative, something of that sort. But I think it will be kind of independent and on a case by case basis, because ego is a hell of a drug.
I don't want to give everyone a heart attack in this room, but I will. It's a fun heart attack. I sit around, I work for the co-founder of Ethereum. My job is to figure out all the parade of horribles that can happen. and for us to try to preempt them from happening. And so that's a simplistic way of my job. But anyway, so I was pondering this the other day, but there are rug pull statutes. This is one that most people don't realize. I'll call it the Paul McCartney statute. But back, and Mitch, you probably know about this one. Musicians really know this well. It's called the Copyright Termination Statute. It's section 203, 17 U.S.C. 203. And that statute was created so that particularly young musicians, but it's any artist, any art, any software developer, any copyright stuff, but it was meant really mostly for musicians. When they're young, the major record labels can take advantage of them. They could say, waive everything, we own everything forever. And then these musicians become famous, and their copyrighted works are owned by the record companies, and they become worth many millions of dollars, and these folks are still making minimum wage. And there's no way for them to unring the bell. And any effort, by Congress to kind of limit it was difficult. So they came up with a statute, 17 U.S.C. 203, which after 35 years from the grant of an assignment or a license, the artist could go ahead and get their copyrights back. It could even be the license back. And that is called the Paul McCartney statute. Paul McCartney implemented that with Sony. And now, because of the timing, a lot of other artists are doing that. So now that they're well-known, famous, and their songs are doing great, they can have some wealth. And this also applies to heirs. So if someone dies, their heirs can go ahead and get the copyrights back. It's quite laudable, to be frank with you. But it could have a chilling effect if folks start analyzing what the hell is a blue chip NFT. You buy that directly from an artist, usually someone who either draws or paints it digitally or creates an MP4, even an MP3 for music, PNG, JPEG, what have you. Those artist heirs, or those artists, 35 years after that grant, can get it back. They could render your content, they could eviscerate it. You don't have a license anymore. You don't even have a non-exclusive, non-commercial license. It's over. They get it back. If heirs get it and they're not tuned in to the community standards, they can get it back. Or they can say, all right, we'll just charge you a new fee and you can have it again. Which is record companies do renegotiate. Well, someone was asking me the other day, well, what's a blue chip NFT? And I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to evaluate a blue chip NFT, I'd evaluate it like if it was a piece of artwork. When you get artwork, you get the physical painting, no one could ever take it back. Section 203 would never apply there because the physical art can't be taken back and it doesn't apply to physical art. Sculptures doesn't apply. It does apply to non-exclusive licenses. It certainly applies to exclusive licenses or copyright assignments. So we do have kind of a bug in the NFT space right now, in that the vast majority of works that are being licensed tethered to an NFT is through a DAPR license, which is non-exclusive, non-commercial. There are exceptions to Section 203, which is beyond the scope of this room for certain work made for hires. But I would argue that unless Congress fixes it, and I'm definitely going to bring this up as part of responding to the executive order, because I think most artists would agree that they'd want to have a carve out for NFTs so we don't chill the space. But I'm going to call that the rug pull statute. And that's what's going to prevent, at least for now, some NFTs from being considered to be blue chip. Thoughts, Mitch?
Well, my thoughts are 2 weeks ago, you and I did a room either here or over on Clubhouse, and we talked for an hour and a half and answered questions about Biden's executive order affecting digital assets, what's really going on, and what we expect to have happen. And, I would just encourage everyone, listen to that recording. It's available on both of our Twitter feeds. And I think when you couple what we talked about 2 weeks ago with what Ira just shared this evening, sounds to me like the key is if, in fact, other subsequent contracts or licenses haven't been negotiated or entered into, you're going to want to make that transaction on year 34 of the item, uh, so that you're 100% sure as to what your options are the following year or two. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting law,
Well,
definitely.
here's this, but here's this. Here's how chilling it is. You're not allowed to waive it. In other words, if the record company said to a young musician, "We want you to waive Section 203," Section 203 of the statute says it's unwaivable for obvious reasons. Every record company would put a waiver provision in their agreements. So it's interesting how the law is sufficiently complex to be counterintuitive, but this is something that needs to be fixed, particularly for the NFT ecosystem, and we're going to raise it, and hopefully Congress will do something. I know that the president and his team did a great job in putting together this executive order. It looks really balanced. I don't want to go back into it. As Mitch said, we have another recording on that, and they're soliciting information. And this could be in the category of a piece of information which would help Congress fix a statute to help the growth of NFTs in the United States.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. I think most people aren't even aware of that. Hey, let's continue, at least giving everyone a chance who has raised their hand and have indicated they have a question to definitely do so, Ira, if you don't mind. I think next in order, at least on my screen, is Scrognar, Scrognar. Please unmute and jump into the conversation.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this. I always really enjoy your talks and get a lot out of it, and I think it's a good, really great service you're doing. In fact, I happened to be the first one to come in the room when you guys were doing some audio testing. My wife was in the room, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm the only one in here. This is like thousands of dollars worth of legal expertise in this room. I gotta,
Thank you.
I have."
Thank
And
you
then, of
for
course, now the room
noticing.
is full. But so anyways, thank you for doing this for starters. I'm a CEO of a company called coinfully.com. We're not a Web3 company as of yet. We buy rare coin collections from the public, and but we have been working on an NFT sort of wing of our company, and the idea is that it's we wouldn't be the first people to be doing NFTs that are tied to a physical asset, but that's without going into the whole details of the whole thing, because I want to get to the question quickly. The idea is basically that we put together a really exciting rare coin collection of $500,000 collection with maybe 50 or 100 items in it, that we would go typically to auction with for sort of the high end coin community. But instead we offer it sort of as like an NFT forward auction, where what's really being bid on is the NFT, and as a company, we would hold custody of the physical assets unless someone wanted to exchange, burn the NFT in exchange for the physical item, or basically trade it like we do with NFTs right now. And there's some sort of exciting things we want to do around this that we think is really going to be what the collector space looks like long term. But I guess what I'm interested in getting your thoughts on, in particular, is the custody part of this. Meaning, we've talked about a lot of different ways, and I've talked to other people in the NFT space around, an oil painting that's being sold as an NFT, and if you hold the NFT for a year, you can cash in and get the oil painting, that sort of thing. For us, we're like, okay, we sell this $500,000 rare coin collection, and we put it in our vault, and we, whatever way we need to make it as official as possible, that people understand we're committed long term to hold this. Basically, the question starts to come up for me, running the company. I was like, okay, is there a time limit that we put on this? Do we say you have 10 years to claim this item? Otherwise, it's just an NFT and it's not related to a physical item. The thing I was trying to understand in that case is, I was having difficulty wrapping my head around the idea of permanently having custody of an asset as a company. Like how do you even commit to that sort of thing? And so I guess if you can, I would love to get your thoughts on custody as it relates to NFTs and physical items. And I would love to hear any thoughts you have on that.
Well, I guess I'll take a shot at that. Well, I have full disclosure. One of the companies I own part of does NFC chips that get tethered to physical items with the goal of tethering them to NFTs. And that's Dreamview, which was just acquired by Infinite World. So basically, Infinite World. So I have looked at this issue for quite a while right now. And it's a weighty issue in terms of, so that's my disclosure. But having said that, in terms of responding to your question, I think Mitch knows this because I said it to him a couple of times. But generally speaking, when it comes to the internet, I like businesses, and I'm half joking, but you'll see my point. I like businesses where you're antisocial. Mitch loves businesses where you're social because he's good at it. But when we created some of the first internet businesses back in '95, one of the ones I worked on with my friends was called friendfinder.com, which turned into a very large dating site. It was called Web Personals, actually. And then we changed it to Friend Finder, created an affiliate program. And the reason why I love that was because we created a multi-sided database. It was a TCP/IP connection, and we charged a fee. It would run itself. There'd be very little customer service. There'd be very little interaction. We wouldn't have to ship a product. And you still have issues, of course. Many of them can be handled through an email at the time and then chat. Great business, very little friction. The business that you're mentioning right now is got a lot of friction in it. You have to get insurance in case your warehouse burns down or if something gets stolen that you're holding. You have to ship things. You got to worry about identity. And we're in a decentralized world. The irony is that not only do you have to know your customer, you have to know the hell out of your customer. So if they come asking for something, you're not giving it to somebody who's the wrong person. And you have to figure out how to work that. So, that's another issue. And then you, of course, pointed out that you have to have agreements. And one of the reasons why I didn't like the Gary V NFT, I mean, look, I love Gary V. I love his NFT, and he's got a whole infrastructure in place, so it's not a big deal for him. But I could never do a Gary V NFT because I don't want to have to hold conferences for 3 years or have continuing relations with people I don't know. Somebody who you don't like buys a service from you. Now you have to service it, and that's part of the trustless system of NFTs. Somebody you don't like buys the NFT. Now you have to deliver services to someone who you may never have agreed to give services to if you knew who they were. So, yeah, your contract's very important, and then you have all the other issues with custodianship, tethering, e-commerce, KYC, and making sure that things don't get stolen and or warehouses get burnt down. So that's my really negative response to probably what could still be a good business model. Mitch?
Well, look, you've lived this, Ira. You understand the nuances. I was intrigued with the question because it seems to be the question that I'm asked often. And I was very curious to hear you answer this, Ira, and it complements some of the things you've mentioned before. Ira, what are your thoughts about creating some type of traditional contractual relationship between the purchaser of the NFT and the company that's storing the coin collection so that it's clearly articulated, as to the length of time that they will be maintaining possession of the coin collection. If it's not acquired within 10 years, for example, it defaults back over to, whoever the individual or trust or new third party is. Are you able to delineate in traditional contract language some of these complications? So it's a combination of a Web3 world in a traditional legal Web 2 world. What are your thoughts on that?
I want to hear more by why this is any different. In other words, if we did this in Web 2 versus Web 3, the contract's going to be the same. In Web 2, you could just give them a virtual token or anything you want. And in Web 3, you're giving them an NFT. That's the only difference. For me, it still comes down to why you would want to do this, combined with, I did hear something that may sound like it's cheat or a waiver or something like that. I don't like the idea of people using it or losing it when it comes to consumer protection. So I'd have to learn more about that. If you don't do something within a certain period of time, that tends to be something where there could be legal risk for being bad. In consumer protection law, negative options are frowned upon, particularly if they're reoccurring. So you can always Google the term negative options and you'll see what I'm saying. But there's federal and state laws, particularly for reoccurring things. I'm not saying, yeah.
Well, would one of the advantages be some type of unlockable component to the NFT relating to the coin collection? Is that to the business owner that asked the question? Is that part of your business model? Are there unlockable components also incorporated into the transaction?
So I'm not as familiar with that concept. I can speak a little bit to the sort of last question that was raised, though, that the reason we like this idea as opposed to maybe some sort of Web 2 digital asset or token, as you said, is just the marketplaces. That it makes it so that, what may be more traditionally a difficult asset to invest in. The idea, I mean, you named the reasons that collectors might be hesitant in talking about the business, which is, we as a company, we already have insurance policies, safes, we already have that stuff for our Web 2 traditional business. But if you're, say, usually you're in the stock market and things like that, and you're like, I want to diversify and I want to buy a $50,000 coin, right? Do you really want that at your house? Do you want to have to get it insured and get a thing to store it? And not everyone is equipped for that. So the idea for us is that it could bring in new people into investing in this particular asset class, and then be able to easily trade it to another person, right? And in a smart contract, we could build in some royalties, and there would be a revenue stream there for us. Where instead of saying I buy a $50,000 coin, now I have to deal with a $50,000 coin, and if I want to sell it, I got to go to an auction house or blah 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 blah. Instead, it's I don't ever have to take possession if I don't want to. I can go on OpenSea and sell this to someone in the snap of a finger and move out of this asset easily. That was kind of the thing we liked about the blockchain part of it.
So let me build it up after tearing it down. There's no doubt that there could be a great market in taking custody for a zillion different things. In other words, if folks don't want to have it in their home, like coin collections, I think a lot of people do like having the coins, to be frank with you, but if they're okay with a trusted party being the custodian, same thing for paintings. Paintings are obvious. I've seen a lot of businesses where they do fractionalized paintings and they hold on to it for you. Almost any class of stuff, particularly things that get better with time. It could be fine wine. You could buy a warehouse full of wine if someone's going to custody it for you, and just trading the token would be a very friction-free way of actually trading lots of wine and lots of paintings and lots of coins. There's no doubt that makes a lot of sense. Now, you're going to have barriers to entry, and that is, why do I trust you? And even more importantly, why do I trust you even if you're trustworthy right now? Because I may outlive you. What happens when you're gone? I mean, I keep joking with folks that I trusted myself so much that I still have Radio Shack gift cards in my desk drawer that I never used. Now, if that was obviously coins, Radio Shack is long BK'd and long gone. And I sucked at making a claim. So, how will they know if you're not going to BK and there's no FDIC or something like that? So even if you have insurance can lapse. The point of the blockchain and decentralization helps you in the sense that you have a frictionless way to trade things that take up a lot of room. The downside is that the people who love decentralization may be scared that they have to now trust you in a centralized manner. And so that's the dichotomy you have to deal with.
Maybe moving on, I just wanted to ask, and I'm sorry, you may have mentioned it, but I didn't write down your name. The gentleman that asked the question, what's your first name?
My name is Travis, and just before I
Travis. Okay.
step down, thank you so much. That is super helpful, and those are some of the challenges we have been running up against the wall against a little bit, and saying, are we making this too hard? Even though we want coins to be able to trade like commodities, and this we feel like it's the future of collectibles. You're right. There's an incompatibility here between the sort of decentralized way of operating and trustless, enterprises and what we're talking about. So I really appreciate those thoughts.
Well, Travis, before you jump down, in fact, you can stay on stage. Don't worry about that. I was going to just share a different perspective, and that is, you know, with the branding and marketing, the enthusiasm, the FOMO, we're just getting started just to use the term Web3, however it's defined. I think there's some advantage to playing in this space and doing what you're doing. And I think that when I see these silly little cat drawings that, frankly, I could do in my sleep with my left hand, and I'm not even an artist, selling for as much ETH as they're selling for, based more on popularity and people wanting to be in the same room with who they interpret to be the cool kids, and all of the FOMO dynamics. Anything that's collectible, like Ira mentioned, wine, coins, artwork, drawings, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to be in these spaces, leveraging all of those other human qualities to maximize the excitement of an opportunity to purchase this coin set. In fact, the way we're set up using this type of technology is it's easy, it's fast, it's protected on the blockchain, and we're going to store it and secure your investment for you if you want us to. That's an option out there. So you've got your tokens. You can share your NFTs with your family and friends through your wallets and on your phones, and show people pictures. But it's just like we're the bank that's protecting that asset. And I think there's a play there that, like Ira said, if you cross your T's and dot your I's, that is what separates you from all the other coin dealers around the United States, Travis, or around the world, is that you're that one entity that's in this space doing things that they're not doing. And I think from a marketing and business perspective, when you do that, that's where the magic happens. Every big industry, and Ira, all the companies that you've been involved with over the years, it's always the company that looks at, a need that needs to be satisfied, or a problem that hasn't been approached a certain way in the past. And it's that one person, that one thought, that one mindset that approaches things from a different perspective, and they end up changing the world if it works out. And I think that if you plan ahead and you're asking the right questions, you might be able to set up a business model where you're minimizing your downside with insurance, with proper contracts, with taking into consideration the things that Ira mentioned, but you're also maximizing your upside so that you're the only player in this space doing things the way you're doing it. So, Travis, I wanted you just to know, I think there's, with everything in mind, there's another way of looking at this. So keep that in mind also.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this all is pure gold. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming up, Travis. Really appreciate it. Bez, you are on stage. Bez and I spent much of the evening last night with a handful of other business owners and entrepreneurs, Ira, on our virtual yacht in the EngageVR.io metaverse. Bez, it's good to see you. That was fun last night.
Yes, Mitch, it was good seeing you. Great conversation, Ira and Mitch. I looked up that case, and two 20-year-olds, they must be pretty scared. So I don't. Uh, what do you think is going to happen out of that? Just out of curiosity, because 40 years. Do you think they'll settle, pay restitution? What are your thoughts?
What do you think, Ira? I haven't even looked at the case, Bez, but I think that normally when you see prosecution like this, somebody's trying to make a point. And I think that point, whatever it is going to be made. It's probably not going to work out very well for the named defendants. But what do you think, Ira? Have you looked at it in any more detail? I cannot hear Ira. He's probably unavailable. Bez, can you hear him, or is it just me?
It's been glitchy all since I've gotten in the room. So just FYI, I don't
Okay,
know what. Yeah,
that's okay. I
I
think he
just know
unmuted. I think he unmuted. Ira, are you back?
I just know that it's one count of wire fraud and one count of money laundering. They each carry max sentences of 20 years.
Yeah. So generally, by the time you see something like what you're seeing, everyone's serious about moving forward with the prosecution to make a point. And I haven't read the facts. I'm going to look at it tonight after the Arizona Houston game. Go Cats! But I'll take a look at it, Bez, and I'll shoot you a DM on Twitter and let you know what my thoughts are, and we can talk about it more. Definitely. I did message Ira because hang on a second.
Hey, and just real quick, while you're doing that, I've been going to NFT Con, just listening in while I'm working throughout the day, and the thing that one of our friends went through, where the hackers were draining the wallets. Actually, that's a thing now. The hackers aren't even doing all these other things; they're going straight to the wallet and draining them, and because they can make so much money quicker. So it is super scary out there right now. So there's a lot of people trying to band together. So because we want mass adoption to move Web3 forward, but stuff like this can scare people.
All right, I'm unrugged. Sorry about that. I am fully unrugged, but
your formal education and degrees. You're a computer programmer, right, Ira? Back in the day,
yeah, 100%.
Computer
Yeah.
science programmer, and OG when it comes to a tech lawyer. And Twitter still bounced you out. It can happen to
Well,
anybody, right?
no, I did something. It was self-inflicted wound. I have three Wi-Fis, and mine was being quirky. So I went from my Wi-Fi to my cellular connection, and normally it works seamlessly, and then I rugged myself. I was self-inflicted rugging. But here's the thing: wire fraud is easy to prove, and this is an easy to prove case. When I said before that they sucked at being bad, you could envision a scenario. I'm not going to lay out a roadmap on how to be bad. We don't want folks being bad. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they could have made it so that at least they weren't, if they kept their website up for more than a minute, even that may have delayed their prosecution. So right now, I think that this is a really, really off the rails case, and they're going to have a hard time defending themselves. The cases that will be more interesting will be the ones that are ambiguous, the ones where there's millions of dollars made, there's a little bit of development, there's emails around saying they want to quit. Some folks quit, some folks don't. And it's murky as hell. And that's where it starts getting more interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Look, from a legal standpoint, everyone, Ira and I have talked about this. We're in for an exciting ride, both good and bad, right? A lot of interesting new IP, new tech, new business opportunities, especially for all the entrepreneurs in the world. On the other side of the coin, when the digital foxes get into the digital hen houses, and it's easier than ever to do this, bad things can happen. And so,
And
I think,
there's also
go ahead.
unintended consequences too.
Yeah.
I go into a lot of these Twitter spaces, and folks are saying, "Oh man, I want to get commercial rights. I want to be able to make art with those commercial rights." And I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of cool. And then the computer scientist in me is thinking, wow, that's just genius and brilliant. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like the old Flintstones with the kazoo. Remember Flintstones? I'm old. There was like
Yeah,
this kazoo
absolutely.
character that would come up, and kazoo is like saying, "Wait a second, if you get commercial rights, and here's the lawyer part, you're no longer a consumer. And what does that matter? You don't have the benefit of consumer protection laws. You're now a business person. You have commercial rights and you're using them. And now you
Mm.
have millions of people who are artists loving the fact that they have commercial rights, doing commercial stuff, sometimes making pennies, and then tearing away all the consumer protection rights they may have as a consumer that you would get under statute because now you fall into a business category. And B2B, it's a lot harder to be protected than in B2C. And so it's almost like if you're going to go ahead and do an NFT drop, offer something that's commercial so that you don't have to worry about consumer protection laws protecting people. I mean, I'm saying that half jokingly, but when you're not a lawyer doing this stuff, it's so counterintuitive.
You
Um,
know what we need? Oh, sorry.
go
Yeah,
ahead, Mitch.
yeah, no, I know. It's we listen to conversations and like I said earlier, people are talking about the tip of the iceberg and they don't realize that 80 or 90% of what they have to think about and do and be concerned with and fix from a legal perspective, it's below the surface. They're probably, Ira, not even aware of it. Okay. And I get that. It's confusing stuff. I think in the future, what I'd like to do is host a Twitter space and talk about, DAOs and decentralized autonomous organizations, the pros and cons, because, they're the everyone loves to talk about we need to start a DAO and we need to do this and do that. But I'm looking at a list in front of me and I'm not going to read it tonight, but I'll invite everyone to stay connected with us. I'm looking at 5 or 6 major significant legal issues right now with me that would lend me to tell a client, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to utilize a traditional corporation to do this project, this NFT drop, or I want you to utilize a limited liability company in the state of California, to do X, Y, Z. And the last thing I would recommend is a DAO for these 7 reasons. And the point is, from my perspective as a lawyer, there's so much happening so fast. There's so much misinformation out there that a lot of people aren't thinking about, that it makes it an interesting time to have these conversations. It's an interesting time to do Q&A. It's an interesting time to get people to start thinking about what they're doing instead of, for example, I was telling Ira earlier today, we had someone that lost 250 grand twice within 3 days, 500 grand in digital currency. So it was a white collar fraud type of situation. And we're working with state, federal authorities right now to see what we can do about it. It can happen like that. And so it's important that we do our due diligence. But Ira, I private messaged you. I do have to jump out of here in about 5 minutes. And we have 2 other people that
Same.
jumped up on stage to
Yeah.
raise their hands. So let's do some quick Q&A and just try to
Yes.
respect everyone. All
Yes.
right. So right now, let's go with Ken. Ken, unmute and jump in, and then we've got one more individual, and we'll call it a night. Hey, Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you
I
clearly.
sure can.
Yeah, so thank you for holding this room. It's the first one I've seen. I haven't been jumping into these spaces until the last few weeks or so. So you might have been here the whole time, but I didn't know you were here. So this is a great service. I'm a CEO of a startup, a technology company that's thinking about doing an NFT drop to raise some capital for a Web3 platform that we're launching. And we believe that we'll be able to solve a lot of the problems, or at least offer some alternatives with respect that's going on, what's going on in the Web3 space. Specifically, we have a semantically intelligent platform. That means that we can be less code-centric and more maybe um, policy, rules, intent as the input, and we regenerate machine level instructions bypassing programming languages, which we think is a big part of the problem, right? Writing code is hard, and often it doesn't reflect the full intent of what is intended to happen. So with that in mind, though, I'm curious, and I think I've heard you allude to your concerns about this tendency to trust the untrustable, untrustable in the sense that Web3, in many respects, looks a lot like Web2, at least from the cybersecurity standpoint, and various other flaws within, the foundations of computing. What would you agree with that assessment?
Well, the trustless part is obviously different. So the blockchain, the encryption, the public ledger, that's the innovation. So from that perspective, it's great. It also, to a certain extent, there are times when it could be easier to hunt down who folks are because of the public blockchain and Etherscan and APIs and blockchain analysis. But there's a lot of Web 2. And if you do dumb stuff in Web 2, phishing, clicking on the wrong links, Trojans, keyloggers, all those things could rear their ugly head through a Web3 manifestation, through the transferring of crypto out of one wallet to another. The downside is much greater, frankly, for hacking for individuals who participate in Web3. You can have bad stuff in Web2 to be sure, but Web3 makes it so fast. It's a dual-use system, the blockchain. It could be used for good things and bad things. The speed and the pseudo-anonymity help folks in underserved nations sell into the whole world, to transfer value in crypto, to make a living. And it really helps people commit fraud more efficiently, too. And how we balance those things are very important.
It's a good question, Ken. I think definitely feel as though, and I just messaged you on Twitter, DM'd you on Twitter, definitely keep the conversation going with us, because I don't know if you caught this. I'm going to have to run, and Ira needs to run, and we want to get to our last raised hand. But if you want to follow up the conversation, Ken, I'd love to. And I know Ira would too. Just reach out to us, okay? All right, that sounds good. And wrapping up tonight, Diamond Hand Gaming. But Diamond Hand, I want you to know we've got 16 seconds left. Number one, Gonzaga is down 65-68 to Arkansas. And I may have to interrupt your question once there's a final. You're up. Unmute.
Yay, sports. I'm just kidding.
No, I hear you. Go ahead.
My question is around giveaways that these NFT projects are doing. Because I've been doing some research on it, because two of the goals I want to do in my project is, one is prizes through contests with more skill-based stuff, and then prizes through games that are more, like, I would say more chance-based. And so what I've been reading up on is, there's all these laws and, what constitutes it as a lottery versus an actual contest. And I guess I just didn't even think about that, because so many NFT projects in their roadmaps, they're basically enticing you to, hey, buy our NFT and you might get dropped 1 ETH randomly. And so I'm just curious, and is there something that maybe I just haven't found in my research that allows you to buy like an NFT as your club membership, and in anticipation that you are going to be eligible for these random drops and giveaways?
All right. Well, I'll give you the quick answer. The quick answer is that presents an unlicensed gambling risk. You've got consideration, you've got, risk, you got a prize. And so there is a very significant illegal gambling risk. When you associate that with an enterprise, a predicate for RICO or racketeering is gambling. And so there could be a criminal prosecution depending upon the context for everyone involved in the enterprise, even folks who worked on it tangentially, to be prosecuted as if they did everything themselves. It's a conspiracy. It could be RICO. It could be racketeering. And there may be risk one day going forward that folks may inadvertently find that they were unfortunately involved in racketeering enterprises. And that's the same statute that they use to prosecute the mob. And so that is my dramatic way of answering your question. Diamond. I think that folks who are involved in the NFT space, where there's games of chance or even loot boxes, should absolutely consult a lawyer before they start engaging that type of thing on their roadmap.
Okay,
Hey,
yeah,
can I?
because that's
Go
what
ahead.
I've been finding is that I'm surprised that these people are able to do this, and I guess maybe just no one pursued going against it yet.
Yeah,
Correct.
Diamond, we're surprised about a lot of things that we see each and every day. We're surprised about a lot of the advice that we hear on Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces from people that spend 15 minutes on Google and think that's going to replace our 3 decades of legal experience. And they're out giving advice. I'm not a lawyer, but this is what I think, and people rely upon that. So for everyone in the audience, first of all, understand it's exciting to have great new ideas, especially when they're Web3 NFT oriented. But if you're on the fence with it doesn't feel right, you're on Google and you're finding articles or you're figuring out maybe there's an issue here, before you spend too much more time, before you spend too much more money, definitely determine whether or not it's something you legally want to try to do. And if so, what do you have to do? What rules and regulations do you need to comply with at both the state and federal level uh, to have a good, positive, productive, lucrative, and legal experience? And there, definitely, and each state's different too. You've got state laws you got to deal with. You've got federal laws, rules, and regulations. So, yeah, I really enjoyed Ira's concise response. And as a lawyer, oftentimes one of the most difficult things for us to do is tell a client what we think, which is oftentimes different than what the client wants to hear. And once I figured that out early in my career, I started sleeping well at night, right? Because you're paying us and you want us to tell you what we think, not what you want to hear. Oftentimes it's the same thing, and that's when magic is made. All right, listen, I've got to run. I know Ira's got to run. And we did talk about the executive order 2 weeks ago. It's in our Twitter feeds. It's was repurposed like in a podcast audio type of mode. So if anybody's interested, check that out. Ira shared a lot of wisdom and gave us some guidance on what to look forward to based upon what was published to date, what he thinks is going to be happening in the future. And Ira, you also have a new NFT protocol. You're involved in a company that I think some of the artists, some of the creators, especially when it comes to royalties, might be interested in. Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, let's just wrap up. I will absolutely shill the next time, as you know, in some other
Okay.
room. But Mitch, thank you very much for the kind words. And if you don't follow Mitch Jackson, make sure you do. He is a supremely talented trial attorney in California, and also extremely skilled at helping people, particularly lawyers, do a great job in social media. And so, thank you very much, Mitch Jackson, for putting on this room as a co-host today. I appreciate it.
Always got your back, my man. Thanks, everyone, for the kind words. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Great questions. Follow up in our DMs, and we will see you next week or the week thereafter and continue the conversation. Everyone, take care and make the rest of your evening a masterpiece. Bye bye, everybody.